Advanced TV Herstory, where hearty discussions of all things TV draws a smart circle around the women who've made it all happen. In each installment, we'll celebrate, educate, illustrate, or analyze, all in hopes of reaching listeners with the message that TV and women are very much a part of our lives, and we like talking about them. Revisit great moments or legacies of talented women. It's all a ticket to inspiration and aspiration. So find this podcast alongside the great ones at Core Temp Arts Network, at Libsyn, Google Music, iTunes, and Auto Radio. Engage with us on Twitter. Our handle is @TV Herstory. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Enjoy. Hello, TV Herstorians. Now, few would argue that the world in 2006 was a very different place than it is today. Original programming streaming over the internet? That didn't exist. Dial-up just wasn't there yet. But cable stations had found a permanent home in people's lives, creating their own programming and showing reruns of beloved classics. Cable was a good place in 2006, and then a moment in TV herstory happened. Or, I should say, it happened on many occasions, many minutes, for a number of years. In that window of time, when the economy shook with intensity that was positively unsustainable, but we hadn't fathomed what a Great Recession would look like. We hadn't figured out how housing was connected to bankers, was connected to your credit report, to your health insurance, to your job. So we hadn't figured that out yet, but Stephen Colbert had figured out that the word truthiness was important to the American lexicon, and he used it in referring to the lack of veracity found in then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld about his and other administration officials' roles in alleged abuses committed at Iraq's Abu Ghraib prison. We looked at power differently, without the jaded skepticism that we have today. The middle class hadn't evaporated. And so it was in 2006 that Sarah McLachlan asked us if we'll be angels.
Hi, I'm Sarah McLachlan. Will you be an angel for a helpless animal?
Now, loyal listeners know that Advanced TV Herstory has recounted careers that have lasted decades and TV series that ran for dozen seasons, give or take. Today, we'll revisit the 2-minute-long infomercial, that PSA, that public service announcement, the song itself, which was released now 20 years ago, and the artist who wrote and performed it, and then who went on to ask us to be angels. And we'll also discuss the PSA's impact and the controversy that ensued for that nonprofit organization. Now, our federal airwaves, broadcast television and cable, are governed by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. And TV station owners can jeopardize their licenses for a host of violations. The FCC's authority usually only gets discussed when violations take place. Like when Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction occurs. Accidental or intentional, that's not for me to decide. But it did happen in front of millions of viewers during Family Hour, or those early evening hours during the Super Bowl halftime. So, violate standards and expect to pay a huge fine to the FCC. But in addition to monitoring standards, the FCC tracks every TV station's commitment to public service, educational, and community programming. An infomercial that promotes the wonders of a line of kitchen gadgets is just paid programming, no different than a TV show. An infomercial with video of starving villagers in Africa and how you can help, that's more public service oriented. Airtime is afforded to a recognized nonprofit organization at little or no cost. And as we all know, big-name celebrities will occasionally do PSAs, but none had ever achieved the impact that Sarah McLachlan's work for the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the ASPCA, did in 2006 and subsequent years. For 2 minutes, she spoke of the national epidemic of abandoned and abused animals. Viewers watched heart-wrenching photos of cats and dogs, which provided the evidence that malnourishment, physical harm, straight-out neglect, this was happening in every state in the Union. Now remember, this was also about the time that American society as a whole had to weigh in on pit bull fighting, as though the activity could be anything but horrific. In 2006, we were treating our animals with violence. 10, 11 years ago. So Sarah McLachlan, in a calm, measured, somber voice with her then 10-year-old song, Angel, playing in the background. Now, everybody knew about the ASPCA. It was a century-old, respected, nonprofit organization. No one knew that so many animals were in need.
Please call the number on your screen with a monthly gift right now. For just $18 a month, only 60 cents a day, you'll help rescue animals from their abusers and provide medical care, food, shelter, and love.
But we had all heard of Sarah McLachlan and perhaps had heard the song and another one of her songs. The song Angel that was used in the PSA had made it all the way up the Billboard charts back in 1999, so it had received quite a lot of radio play. And it was in 1996 as well, when the song debuted, that McLachlan and her peers from what is really an incredible class of singer-songwriting women produced Lilith Fair. And they did so because what they had really come to learn was that the big touring festival producers would not feature women singers one after another. They were never banded together within a larger festival tour. They were interspersed amongst many, many more male performers. And when you think of it today, just even seeing the ads, music festivals still promote lineups that scream gender disparity. Haven't we learned from 2017 in movie box office results that women can and do deliver? So yes, the song was a radio favorite by the late 90s and was featured in a movie, but its meaning isn't religious, as much as you might think it is. In interviews, McLachlan freely shares that it's about the heroin overdose death of a member of the Smashing Pumpkins. And she stated that she could really relate to the sense of despair and hopelessness that might lead someone to heroin. If you listen to the lyrics closely, it all starts to make sense. But let me be clear that McLachlan says that she's known that misery, but she has not ever done heroin. And she went on to say that the song is about, quote, trying not to take responsibility for other people's problems and trying to love yourself at the same time, which is interesting in context of being used to aid those that can't possibly take care of themselves, animals that have been abused and neglected. So lo and behold, the emerging Canadian talent who has since been honored with the Order of Canada and the Order of British Columbia and has a place in the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, was contacted by a friend of hers who served at that time on the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Vancouver. Now, according to a 2008 New York Times article, ASPCA had been working with a Canadian firm that connects celebrities to causes to build awareness and fundraise. The firm had previously found actors who would do PSAs for the animal group, kind of B-listers. This board member's outreach to McLachlan changed the face of fundraising forever. Now, today, the PSA is simply known as the ad. It is that well known. And early donations back in late 2006 and into 2007, which were made upon the PSA's airing, then enabled the New York-based nonprofit to buy time on bigger networks into prime time. So it went from being something very small and sort of done on the cheap to all of a sudden being leveraged into significant national exposure. McLachlan went on to tell the Charlotte Observer newspaper, quote, I felt like a fraud because I just did this little commercial. I love animals as much as the next person, but if I really wanted to attach myself to something, it would be kids and education, end quote. There's a lot to think about with just that statement. While she also told the Charlotte Observer that, quote, when you attach a piece of music to something, it's sort of an innocent thing, end quote, it is a reminder that the power of storytelling in the hands of a producer, big league or small agency, that's a powerful thing. 2 minutes of a deeply moving song, an earnest singer-songwriter's voice, and compelling pictures were enough. In 2006, 2007, and subsequent years, it raised $30 million for the ASPCA. That is huge. And sure more than anyone dreamed could come from the effort. Now, the next chapter in this PSA's story is what power that $30 million held for the organization and what I believe was a halo effect for rescued animals in general. So from the get-go, the McLachlan PSA brought in the dough. It bankrolled ad buys to create national exposure for a nonprofit that sure sounded national. And don't national nonprofits then send money back to the states? Well, okay, so the A in ASPCA, the America part, that's what some people didn't know, was that they also were SPCAs in their states or regions throughout North America. They didn't know that they weren't necessarily connected. So when did the ad that went national, that brought in small dollar donations from literally throughout the world, did it do so at the expense of those smaller organizations? I can only imagine that in a short period of time, the ASPCA's National Finance Office was processing donations hand over fist. People were calling in every time it aired. Did they have a strategy to roll out the proceeds to that loose network that extended into American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and I'm not sure about the Canadian component, and the 50 states of the United States? What was that strategy? And the ad launched in late 2006, I think. There's not really firm information about that, and began an aggressive airing in 2007 and 2008. But even by 2008, it was parodied and a very popular rant among comedians. It was acceptable to find those 2 minutes to be over the top, but clearly it moved a lot of people to act. And act they did. So the amount of $30 million gets used as the amount raised through the PSA. As many years have passed in the ASPCA, the financial records are only available on the website for like the past few years. We don't really know how much of the $30 million was funneled back into buying ad time, which is the cost of fundraising, or how much has gone into an endowment by which perhaps the organization continues to draw interest. So figure that with that intense saturation back in 2007, 2008, the state organizations are sort of waiting for their payday, right? This is going to happen. Well, by 2011, those state organizations, the SPCAs, as well as humane societies, were wondering what was the deal. And if the money is going to get raised through these nationally aired commercials and contributions, real dollars leave the state, was that really what the donor intended, or did the donor make some assumptions when he or she picked up the phone and made the pledge? Now, the Los Angeles CBS TV local affiliate reported in May 2011 that the Humane Society of California had filed a complaint with the state's Attorney General about the national organization's redistribution formula. Massachusetts and New Jersey organizations also complained in 2011 that the funding formula back into their states was really not likely to reflect the dollars that had been raised from their residents. All of this is inside politics of the ASPCA and humane societies and the state and regional societies. But while it might seem that this discussion about national fundraising and regional or local needs falls far outside the realm of advanced TV herstory, why are we here, Cynthia? Let me explain this. This is the important part. Sarah McLachlan is a singer. She's a Canadian singer. She volunteered her time to an organization, and as a result of a brilliant composition of visual and audio haunts, it struck a nerve in this country at a time when we really didn't know what was going to hit us. What was and is the end game for a nonprofit organization? Don't all animal shelters share roughly the same mission? Would there have been any way for California, yes, one of the largest states with a wealthy, compassionate population, that the Humane Society of California could raise the dollars that were sent to the national organization? It seems unlikely, or they would have done it already. But I will give credit to the dialogue then that took place years later, and probably still is part of the organizational framework as the pet rescue industry gets together, and that is that I believe that McLachlan's work raised considerably more than $30 million, and I believe it raised awareness significantly. I personally am not one to respond to televised appeals for funds. I do send checks to local organizations. I do sponsor people participating in 5Ks and 10Ks, and I donate supplies for use at local shelters. And even though it's been many years since that PSA, commercial, whatever you want to call it, aired on TV, the images are seared in my memory, and you can find them on YouTube. They prompt me to act, even today. In addition to her work for the ASPCA, McLachlan has contributed time and political voice to countless other causes. She cares. This is part of her commitment and the use of her voice and her talents. And if you're working out at your gym on a Sunday morning, chances are good that some cable channel is showing an infomercial for a famine relief organization or some other good cause. Alyssa Milano, Sally Struthers, they might be the celebrity spokesperson. Also, there are causes like Stand Up to Cancer and fundraisers for relief following domestic disasters like 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. And they bring out the best in celebrities. They raise fast money, and that money should be collected only by organizations of highest integrity. With good intentions, everyone wants to be a hero. So it's with a sense of irony that we revisit McLachlan's quote to the Charlotte Observer. Quote, "I love animals as much as the next person, but if I really wanted to attach myself to something, it would be kids and education." Okay, this is me, though we see the challenges becoming greater with each passing year for kids and education. That multi-generational poverty and achievement gaps and poor nutrition and abuse, no one wants to be the hero for kids and education. Not even the people elected to state and national office, for whom we hold our vulnerable populations and the education of our populace as part of their responsibility. Okay, TV historians, this is what I can tell you. I only know that women need all the sustenance and support that they can get. And Sarah McLachlan gives it to me whenever I need to put my headphones on and have my heart touched. We are outnumbered and out-resourced every day on TV. Our voices are marginalized or dismissed on news analysis panels. And yes, reports indicate that sports coverage of women athletes has become more, not less, sexist and racist. And we don't have an hour, let alone full days of weekend coverage across numerous channels to cover the actions and the women in and of TV. I mean, really, when was the last time you were thinking about Sarah McLachlan? And maybe you didn't know that as a result of her song and her presence and her willingness to step up, that she raised that much money and that much awareness for dogs and cats. But picture this, 2 or 3 smart women sitting at the desk with screens and a telestrator, an hour dedicated to breaking down the reactions of Anita Hill's testimony in 1991 before the Senate Judiciary Committee, or statistics, body language, and context provided by Professor Hill herself, or an opportunity to ask Sarah McLachlan a little bit more about the kind of feedback that she gets probably even today, 10 years later, about that very important PSA. But give yourself a minute to think about the ways that the media, from teen magazines to TMZ, they feed on the fake news that normalizes toxic relationships among women. Where can women go to have the kind of analysis and understanding that helps us support each other, to advance our own causes, and to celebrate the talents and the accomplishments that we all have? Well, until such time as that show reaches TV, rest assured you'll find it here at Advanced TV Herstory. Subscribe on Google Play, iTunes, and Auto Radio. Play it directly on Player FM, Libsyn, or our podcast website, www.tvherstory.com. Your recommendations about anything about TV. What has been important to you? When did you see yourself finally on TV? Those mean the world to me. Your ideas for future shows are really important. What's also important is that you help someone, a new listener, master the easiest way for them to listen to this show. It's the greatest compliment. Music in this podcast used in our introduction is from Free Music Archive, and that's found at www.freemusicarchive.org. It's from Jazzer. It's called Lift Me Higher. Audio wizardry by the talented David Brown. As always, our Twitter handle is @TVHerstory. Our email is advancedtvherstory@gmail.com. And it's checked quite frequently. It's never been more important for girls and women to see themselves on TV, all colors, shapes, and interests we experience in our lives. The only way this will happen is for women to reclaim our status. We need to band together, ladies, to educate, celebrate, and fortify one another. Please be part of this important conversation. This is why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.
Thank you for listening to the Court Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Court Arts shows, visit courtamparts.com.